For 38 years, I was just static in the background while my sister was the main event. People only learned my name when they needed a check signed or a crisis managed. The terrifying part was not being invisible. It was realizing I was not loved, just utilized. So I stopped moving out of their way. I stopped fixing things. And now, I am just waiting for the crash. My name is Caroline Howard, and for most of my 38 years on this earth, I have existed as a functional prop in the elaborate stage play of my family. I am the coat rack in the corner, the extra chair pulled up to the table when the guest list expands unexpectedly, the person you hand your empty wine glass to because your hands are full of gifts for someone else. I grew up in the humid, moss-draped suburbs just outside Savannah, Georgia, a place where the air is thick enough to chew and appearances are harder than the diamonds on my mother's fingers. In our world, or rather in their world, being good was irrelevant. Being seen as good was the only currency that mattered. If you looked at our family photos, the ones lined up on the mantel in silver frames polished to a blinding shine, you would see a pattern. There is my father, Hank, with his politician smile and a hand resting possessively on my mother's shoulder. There is my mother, Darlene, whose hair has not moved a fraction of an inch since 1995. And front and center, catching the light like a prism, is my sister, Blair Whitman. And then, usually slightly out of focus or partially obscured by a decorative fern, there is me. Blair was the princess. This is not bitterness speaking, it is just data. I deal in data. I look at facts, trace patterns, and draw conclusions. That is my job, and it has become my life. Blair was beautiful in that obvious, undeniable way that Southern culture demands. She had the blonde hair that looked like spun gold, the laugh that sounded like wind chimes, and the uncanny ability to make people feel like they were the most important person in the room. Right up until she needed to move on to someone more influential. She married early, of course. She married a man of infinite potential, and everyone said she was so blessed. That was the word they used constantly. Blessed. Blair was blessed with a beautiful home. Blair was blessed with charm. Blair was blessed with a life that looked like a catalog for high-end linen. I was not blessed. I was durable. I remember my high school graduation dinner. We were at a steakhouse downtown, the kind with white tablecloths and waiters who sweep the crumbs off the table with a little silver tool. My father raised his glass for a toast. I sat up straighter, preparing my face to look humble yet grateful. He cleared his throat and spent 5 minutes talking about how proud he was that Blair had been accepted into her sorority legacy at the state university, and how he knew she would uphold the family name with grace. He sat down and took a sip of his bourbon. It took my mother 3 minutes to realize he had not mentioned that I was the valedictorian. She patted my hand and whispered that Daddy was just tired. And besides, everyone knew I was smart, so there was no need to make a fuss. That was the theme. No need to make a fuss over Caroline. Caroline is fine. Caroline is self-sufficient. Caroline is the background noise that hums along steadily so the main melody can soar. I eventually stopped waiting for the toast. I moved 2,000 miles away to Seattle, Washington, swapping the suffocating humidity of Georgia for the gray, sterile drizzle of the Pacific Northwest. It was a calculated move. I needed distance, not just geographically, but emotionally. I built a career that my family could not understand, and therefore could not critique. I work for a company called Ravenport Risk Dynamics. It sounds vague and corporate, which is exactly how I like it. My official title is Senior Director of Global Fraud Investigations, but what I actually do is hunt. I hunt for anomalies. I hunt for the digital fingerprints of fraud. I spend my days staring at lines of code, bank transfers, and communication logs, looking for the tiny fractures in the system that suggest someone is lying. I am very good at it. I am good at it because I spent my entire childhood observing human behavior from the sidelines. I know exactly what it looks like when someone is trying to curate a reality that does not exist. When I save a client from a phishing scheme that could cost them $5 million, or when I patch a security vulnerability that would have leaked the private data of 10,000 users. I get a generic email from upper management. It usually says something like, "Great catch, Caroline," or "Fixed. Thanks. It is transactional. I provide a service, I repair the damage, I make the problem go away." No one asks me how I slept. No one asks if the stress is eating a hole in my stomach lining. They just want to know that the wall is patched and the barbarians are back outside the gate. It is shockingly similar to my dynamic with my parents. When I call home, the conversation follows a rigid script. My mother talks for 20 minutes about the renovations on Blair's kitchen, about the specific shade of grage paint they chose, accessible beige. I believe it was called, and how expensive contractors are these days. Then she asks if I'm still doing that computer thing. I say yes. She says, "Well, as long as it pays the bills." Then she puts my father on, who asks if I have found a church yet, and before I can answer, he hands the phone back to my mother to say goodbye. I have accepted this, or at least, I thought I had. I have Nicholas, and Nicholas is the only reason I have not completely dissolved into the ether. Nicholas Bramwell is my husband. He is a man of few words, which makes him an anomaly in my life of loud, performative people. He is a structural engineer. He understands load-bearing walls. He understands tension and compression, but more than that, he understands people. He can sit in a room for an hour without speaking. And when we leave, he can tell me exactly who is sleeping with whom, who is embezzling funds, and who is desperately unhappy. Nicholas was the first person to look at me and actually see me. Not the Caroline who gets good grades. Not the Caroline who is Blair's sister. Just Caroline. I remember the first time I took him to Georgia to meet the family. It was 3 years ago. We were sitting on the back porch, sweating through our clothes despite the ceiling fans spinning overhead. Blair was holding court, recounting a story about a charity gala she had organized. She was animated, using her hands, making everyone laugh at the right moments. I was refilling the pitcher of sweet tea because my mother had gestured vaguely at it with her empty glass. Nicholas watched me pour the tea. He watched me walk around the table, filling everyone's glass. He watched them not say thank you. He watched me sit back down and fold my hands in my lap, waiting for a break in the conversation that I knew would not come. Later that night, in the guest room that still smelled like my grandmother's lavender sachets, Nicholas sat on the edge of the bed and looked at me. "They do not hear you," he said. It was not a question. I shrugged, hanging my dress in the closet. "They are just loud. It is how they are." "No," he said, his voice level and calm. "It is not volume. Caroline, it is erasure. You speak, and they tune it out like static. You are background noise to them." Hearing him say it out loud felt like someone had cracked a rib. It hurt, but it was a validating pain. It confirmed that I was not crazy. I was not imagining the slight. I was being actively, systematically overlooked. Nicholas became my anchor. He was the one thing in my life that felt solid, the one variable that did not shift depending on the audience. But even with Nicholas, even with the job at Ravenport Risk Dynamics, where I command a salary that would make my father choke on his scotch if he knew the actual number, I still have this habit, this dangerous, ingrained reflex. I shrink. I do it in meetings. I do it in line at the grocery store. If someone bumps into me, I apologize. If a colleague interrupts me, I stop talking and let them finish. I make myself small so that I do not inconvenience anyone. I smooth the edges of my personality so that I am easy to digest. I have spent decades perfecting the art of being low maintenance. I thought this was a survival mechanism. I thought that if I asked for nothing, I could not be disappointed. I thought that if I did not demand attention, I could not be rejected. But I am realizing now that there is a fatal flaw in that logic. When you make yourself small, you do not just become invisible, you become usable. You become a resource. People stop seeing you as a person with needs and start seeing you as an object with a function. This morning, the realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. I was sitting in our apartment in Seattle, drinking black coffee and looking out at the gray water of the Sound. It was raining, a soft, relentless drizzle that blurred the horizon. My phone buzzed on the granite countertop. I looked at the screen. It was a text from my mother. It was not a checking-in text. It was not a Happy Tuesday text. It was a picture of an invitation. Dad's 78th birthday. Big party at the club. Everyone is coming. We need you there. There was no question mark. It was not a request. It was a summons. I zoomed in on the image. It was elaborate. Cream cardstock with gold embossing. My father's name was written in a calligraphy script that I knew cost $3 an envelope to address. My stomach tightened, not the flutter of excitement, but the cold, heavy drop of dread. I have not been back to Georgia in 18 months. I send gifts. I send cards. I send polite text messages on holidays. I keep the bridge intact. But I do not walk across it. But this felt different. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Blair. Please come. Mom is driving me crazy with the planning. Plus, I have this amazing idea I want to run by you. It is huge. I stared at the words. I have an amazing idea. In the language of my sister. An amazing idea usually meant she needed something. It meant she had overextended herself and needed a bailout. It meant she wanted to use my brain, or my time, or my skills, to polish her own image. I looked at the rain sliding down the glass of the window. I am a senior risk analyst. My entire career is built on assessing probability and potential damage. I look at a situation, identify the variables, and predict the outcome. I looked at the invitation again. I looked at Blair's text. The data points were aligning. The sudden insistence on my presence, the mention of a huge idea, the fact that my father was turning 78, an age where estate planning starts to become a dinner table conversation rather than a vague concept. They did not just want me there to sing happy birthday. They did not want Caroline the daughter. They wanted Caroline the utility. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was not fear, exactly. It was colder than that. It was the feeling of a lock clicking into place. For years, I had stayed away to protect myself. I had stayed silent to keep the peace. I had let them treat me like background noise because I thought it was the price of admission to the family. But Nicholas was right. They do not fear losing me, because you do not fear losing something you do not value. They only fear losing what I can provide. I picked up the phone. I did not reply immediately. I let the screen go dark. I am not the same woman who sat at that graduation dinner and swallowed her pride along with the cold steak. I am not the girl who apologizes for taking up space. I run investigations for Ravenport Risk Dynamics. I catch people who think they are smarter than the system. If they want me to come home, I will come home. But I'm not bringing the checkbook. I'm not bringing the fix-it kit. I am bringing the truth. I looked over at Nicholas, who was sitting in the armchair reading a manual on structural integrity. As if he could feel my gaze, he looked up. He saw the phone in my hand. He saw the set of my jaw. He did not ask what was wrong. He just asked one question. Do you want to go? I looked back at the invitation on the screen. I think I have to, I said, and my voice sounded strange to my own ears. Steady, resolute, it is not about the party. He closed his book. I know, he said. I have a feeling that this time, being seen is not going to be the relief I always thought it would be. When you turn up the volume on background noise, sometimes you realize it is not a hum, it is a warning siren. I typed a reply to my mother. We will be there. I hit send. And for the first time in my life, I did not feel like I was walking into a room to hide. I felt like I was walking into a room to hunt. The years before I became a ghost in my own family history were not glamorous. They were built on gray carpet tiles and the hum of server fans in windowless basements. When I first entered the workforce, I was 22 years old. I had a degree that my father thought was suitable for a secretary and a brain that worked faster than anyone gave me credit for. I landed a job at a mid-sized logistics firm doing data entry. That was the official title. In reality, I was the girl people called when they forgot their passwords or when the printer jammed. I was the computer girl. I made $35,000 a year. and I lived in a studio apartment that smelled permanently of boiled cabbage because the ventilation system was shared with the elderly couple next door. My family did not ask about my work then because there was nothing to brag about. I was not a doctor. I was not a lawyer. I was not married to a man who owned a dealership. I was just Caroline, typing away at a keyboard, presumably doing something boring that involved spreadsheets. That dismissal was my first layer of armor. While they ignored me, I learned. I stayed late, not to impress a boss, but to read the code that ran the company. I taught myself Python and SQL on weekends while Blair was attending bridal showers and posting photos of mimosa flights. I learned how money moved through digital pipes. I learned that every click leaves a trace, and every thief, no matter how clever, leaves a shadow. I pivoted from IT support to risk analysis when I was 26. It was not a promotion I was given. It was a position I created. I found a discrepancy in the shipping logs, a pattern of fuel surcharges that did not match the mileage. I wrote a report. I walked into the CFO's office, my hands shaking inside the pockets of my cheap blazer, and I laid it on his desk. That afternoon, I saved the company $400,000. They did not give me a parade. They gave me a 10% raise and a new title. But they also gave me silence. They did not want anyone to know how vulnerable they had been. That was my first lesson in the value of secrets. My career at Ravenport Risk Dynamics began 3 years later. By then, I was hardened. I had stopped looking for validation and started looking for leverage. The work I do is not the kind you talk about at cocktail parties. I do not create apps. I do not design websites. I clean up messes. I find the rot inside financial institutions and I cut it out. It is a profession that requires a distinct lack of ego. If I do my job perfectly, absolutely nothing happens. The systems stay up. The money stays safe. The headlines remain empty. I am the firewall. And nobody thanks the firewall until the hackers are already inside the house. The turning point. The moment my life truly diverged from the trajectory my family assumed I was on happened 5 years ago. I cannot give you the specifics of the company involved. Even now, the non-disclosure agreement I signed is thick enough to stop a bullet, but I can tell you that a major fintech corporation was hours away from a catastrophic data breach that would have exposed the social security numbers of 40 million people. It was 3 a.m. I was sitting at my desk with dry eyes and a cold cup of coffee, and I saw the anomaly. It was a single line of code that did not belong, a backdoor left open by a disgruntled developer. I closed the door. I traced the source. I neutralized the threat before a single byte of data was stolen. The next day, I sat in a conference room with 3 men in suits who looked like they were about to have heart attacks. They slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a bonus check. The number written on that line was more money than my father had made in the last 10 years combined. Then they slid the NDA across the table. They were buying my silence. They were buying the assurance that the world would never know how close they came to ruin. I signed, I took the check, and I went home to Nicholas. We opened a bottle of wine, not expensive champagne. Just a decent red we liked, and we looked at the bank balance on my laptop screen. We could buy a house in the suburbs, I said. We could buy a boat. We could buy a new car to replace your sedan. Nicholas shook his head. He looked at me with that calm, steady gaze that always slows my pulse. No, he said. If we buy the flashy things, people will ask questions. And if people ask questions, you have to lie. Let's buy freedom instead. So we moved to Seattle. We found an apartment on the 34th floor of a building made of steel and glass. It is not a mansion. From the outside, it is just another unit in a city full of tech workers, but inside, it is a sanctuary. We have a view of the Puget Sound that stretches all the way to the Olympic Mountains. On gray days, the water and the sky merge into a canvas of slate and silver. We have furniture that is comfortable, art that we actually like, and a kitchen with appliances that work silently. We did not post a photo of the view on Facebook. We did not check in at the luxury building on Instagram. To my family back in Georgia, we just moved to the city for work, renting, probably, getting by. I continued to play the part of the struggling, or at least mediocre, daughter. I sent gifts home with religious regularity. For Mother's Day, I sent a silk scarf. For my father's birthday, a bottle of aged bourbon. For Blair's baby shower, a high-end stroller that I claimed I found on sale. I kept the price tags off, but I kept the quality high. I wanted to be a good daughter, but I did not want to be a successful one. It was a strange tightrope to walk. I watched from 2,000 miles away as Blair's life became a public performance of perfection. She would post photos of her renovated sunroom, captioning them with hashtags about blessings and hard work. I knew, because I analyze financial behaviors for a living, that her husband's dealership was leveraging debt to pay for that sunroom. I knew the math did not add up, but the comments section was full of adoration. So beautiful, you deserve it. Meanwhile, I was wiring investment capital into diversified index funds and buying rental properties in Arizona under an LLC that did not bear my name. I was building a fortress of financial independence so strong that nothing could shake it. Yet, when I spoke to my mother on the phone, she would use that sympathetic tone she reserves for the less fortunate. "Are you sure you guys are okay up there? It is so expensive in the city. Make sure you are saving a little bit. Caroline, you never know when a rainy day will come." I would look out my window at the literal rain falling on a city where I owned a piece of the skyline, and I would say, "Thanks, Mom, we are being careful. We are watching our pennies." The paradox began to gnaw at me. The more successful I became, the quieter I had to be. In a normal family, success is shared, it is celebrated. You get a promotion, you call your dad, you get a big bonus. You take your mom to dinner, but in my family, attention was transactional. If I told them I had money, the dynamic would shift instantly. I would stop being the disappointment and start being the bank. They would not be proud of me. They would be entitled to me. I remember one specific evening about 6 months ago. Nicholas and I were sitting on our balcony. The city lights were blinking on below us. A grid of gold against the dark. I had just closed a massive investigation for a bank in Zurich. The fee was astronomical. I felt a sudden, sharp urge to tell someone. I wanted to call my mother and say, "I made it. I am not the background noise. I am the signal." I turned to Nicholas. "Why do I feel guilty?" I asked him. "Why do I feel like I am lying to them by not showing them this?" Nicholas put down his book. He took a sip of his water and looked at me. "You are not lying. Caroline, you are protecting the peace. But maybe they would change." I said, "Maybe if they knew I was successful, they would respect me. Maybe they would stop treating me like I'm invisible." Nicholas leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. He looked intense, his eyes searching mine. "Do you really believe that? Or do you just hope it?" I stayed silent. He continued, his voice low and firm. "Think about how they treat Blair. They consume her. They eat up her image because it makes them look good. If they knew what you had, they wouldn't just want the image. They would want the substance. You do not fear them seeing you. Caroline, you fear them seeing what they can take." His words hung in the cold night air. He was right. My family operated on a scarcity mindset disguised as abundance. They grasped at status because they were terrified of irrelevance. If they found out that the quiet daughter, the one they forgot to introduce at parties, was sitting on a mountain of resources, they would not applaud. They would swarm. I went back inside and closed the glass door, shutting out the city noise. I looked at my reflection in the dark window. I saw a woman wearing a $300 cashmere sweater that my mother would assume came from a thrift store. I saw a woman who could buy her parents' house in cash tomorrow if she wanted to. I realized then that my silence was not just a shield. It was a test. I wanted to be loved for the nothing they thought I had. I wanted them to ask, "How are you?" without checking my credit score first. But that test was failing. They never asked. They only assumed. And as long as they assumed I was struggling, I was safe. So I kept my mouth shut. I went to work. I caught the bad guys. I watched my bank account grow with the compound interest of solitude. And I let Blair have the likes. the comments, and the hollow praise. I told myself it was enough. I told myself I did not need their applause. But deep down, a part of me was waiting. I was waiting for the moment the curtain would fall, and they would realize that while they were busy posing for the audience, I had bought the theater. The Oakhaven River Club was exactly as I remembered it, a sprawling monument to Southern Gothic architecture and exclusion. The air inside smelled of lilies, lemon polish, and old money that was desperately trying to convince everyone it was still liquid. We walked in through the double mahogany doors, Nicholas's hand resting lightly on the small of my back. The humidity of the Georgia evening clung to my skin for the split second before the industrial-strength air conditioning hit us, drying the sweat instantly. I had dressed for this moment with the same precision I used to prepare for a board audit. I was not wearing the pastel sundresses or floral prints that my mother always tried to force on me. I was wearing a black, structured sheath dress that cost more than the first car I ever owned. It was severe, architectural, and completely out of place in a room full of chiffon and seersucker. My hair was cut into a sharp bob, exposing my neck, and I wore no jewelry except for my wedding band and a watch that whispered wealth rather than screaming it. I saw them immediately. My family does not blend in. They occupy space. They were holding court near the open bar, a gravitational center pulling in guests who wanted to be close to the shine. My mother, Darlene, was wearing a shade of blue that I am sure she believed brought out her eyes, but actually just made her look frantic. My father, Hank, was shaking hands with the practiced grip of a man who is always selling something. And there was Blair. She looked perfect. In that exhausting, curated way. She was wearing a pale pink dress that matched the floral arrangements on the tables. She was laughing at something a local judge was saying. Her head thrown back, her hand touching his arm just so. It was a performance I had watched 1,000 times. Nicholas leaned close to my ear. His voice was low, barely a vibration against the ambient noise of clinking glass and polite chatter. "Are you ready?" he asked. I took a breath. "I am not here to fight," I whispered back. "I am just here to be present." We approached the circle. My mother spotted us first. Her eyes widened, not with warmth, but with a flicker of assessment. She scanned me from shoes to hairline in less than a second, looking for a loose thread, a scuff, anything she could offer a helpful critique on. When she found nothing, she seemed almost disappointed. "Caroline," she announced, her voice pitching up an octave. "You made it. We were worried you would get lost coming from the airport. You know how the new highway construction is?" I smiled. It was a tight, practiced smile. "We have GPS. Mom, we are fine. Happy birthday. Dad." I moved to hug my father. He smelled of scotch and aftershave. He patted my back twice, a rhythmic dismissal, before looking over my shoulder to see who else was arriving. "Well, you are here," he said, releasing me. "Go get a drink. Don't stand there blocking the flow." It was the same script. I was expected to fade back, to find a corner, to talk to the elderly relatives who had lost their hearing aids so the important people could discuss business. But I did not move. I stood my ground, right there in the center of the circle. Nicholas stood next to me, solid as a rock. Blair turned toward me then. Her eyes were bright. Too bright. "Carrie," she squealed, using the nickname I had asked her to stop using 10 years ago. "You look so serious. Is that Seattle fashion? It is so dark. It is tailored." I said simply, "You look nice. Blair." Darlene clapped her hands together, drawing the attention of the group back to the main attraction. "Oh, stop it. You two. We were just telling Judge Miller about Blair's new project. She is chairing the Heritage Committee this year. It is a massive responsibility. They only ask the most organized women in town. I watched Blair preen. It is a lot of work," she said with a sigh that was meant to sound humble. "But someone has to preserve our history." The group murmured their approval. Wonderful. So dedicated. A real pillar of the community. Then, a voice cut through the praise. It was Aunt Phyllis, my father's older sister. She was a woman who had no filter and even less patience for Darlene's theater. She peered at me over the rim of her martini glass. So, Caroline, she barked. Still out in Seattle. What are you doing with yourself? Last I heard you were fixing computers in a basement somewhere. My mother laughed. A nervous, tinkling sound. Oh, Phyllis. You know Caroline. She likes her little tech things. She's just renting a place out there. Figuring it out. We keep telling her she should come home and teach at the community college. The air in the circle went still. I felt the familiar weight of their erasure settling on my shoulders. Little tech things. Renting. Figuring it out. They were rewriting my reality in real time to make themselves comfortable. In the past, I would have nodded. I would have said, yes, just working hard, and let the conversation drift back to Blair. But tonight, the champagne in my hand felt cold and sharp. I thought about the view from my balcony. I thought about the team of 40 analysts who report to me. I thought about the signature I put on a report last week that authorized a risk assessment for a merger worth $3 billion. Actually, Mom, I said. My voice was not loud, but it was clear. It cut through the humidity like a scalpel. I am not renting. Nicholas and I bought a penthouse in Belltown last year. It has a view of the bay. Darlene froze. Her smile stayed plastered on her face, but her eyes went dead. Aunt Phyllis blinked. Bought in Seattle. Isn't that market expensive? It is competitive. I agreed, taking a sip of my drink, but it was a cash offer, so that simplified things. And I am not fixing computers. I was promoted to Senior Director of Global Fraud Investigations at Ravenport Risk Dynamics 18 months ago. I oversee risk mitigation for our entire North American sector. The silence that followed was absolute. It was not the polite silence of people listening. It was the stunned silence of a hierarchy collapsing. Blair's smile faltered. The corner of her mouth twitched, a tiny spasm of control slipping away. Wait, she said, her voice strained. You are a director, like a manager. No, I said gently. Not a manager, a director. I answered to the C-suite. I watched my father. He had been looking past me, scanning the room for someone more important. But as the words cash offer and senior director registered, his head snapped back to me. The look in his eyes changed instantly. The dismissal vanished. In its place was something far more unsettling. He looked at me the way he looked at a classic car he had just found in a barn under a tarp. He looked at me with calculation. Ravenport, he said, testing the word. I read about them in the journal. They just acquired that cybersecurity firm in Austin. Didn't they? Yes. I said, I led the due diligence on that acquisition. The atmosphere in the circle shifted violently. The guests, who had previously looked through me as if I were made of glass, suddenly brought me into sharp focus. A man I barely knew, a cousin's husband named Rick, took a step closer. You led the diligence, Rick asked, his tone suddenly respectful. That was a $400 million deal. You handle that kind of volume? My portfolio covers assets in the 9-figure range. I said, it is stressful, but I enjoy the complexity. My mother was blinking rapidly. She looked from me to Blair, then back to me. She was trying to recalibrate the narrative, but the data was coming in too fast. Her fixer-upper daughter had just walked in and announced she was the most powerful person in the circle. Blair let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. Well, she said, you kept that quiet. Why didn't you tell us? We have been sending you $20 gift cards for Starbucks because we thought you were broke. I didn't say I was broke. Blair, I replied, keeping my tone level. I just didn't say I was rich. There is a difference. The word rich hung in the air. I had never used it before. It felt vulgar, but it was necessary. It was the only language they spoke fluently. My father took a step toward me. He put a hand on my shoulder. But this time it was not a pat. It was a grip, a claim. Well, now, he boomed, his voice swelling with performative pride. That is my girl, always the quiet achiever. I always told Darlene, you watch that one. Still waters run deep. I almost laughed. He had never said that. He had said, still waters mean the drain is clogged, but history was being rewritten again. this time to cast him as the visionary father who knew his daughter's worth all along. The questions started then. They came like a barrage of arrows. What is the real estate market doing in the Pacific Northwest? Do you have inside tips on the tech sector? I have this portfolio that is underperforming. Who do you use for wealth management? I answered them vaguely, deflecting with professional non-answers. The market is volatile. I cannot give financial advice. We keep our investments private. But the hunger in their eyes was undeniable. They were not looking at Caroline, the daughter. They were looking at Caroline, the liquidity event. I looked over at Blair. She was not asking questions. She was staring at my dress. She was staring at my watch. She was doing the math. I could see the gears turning in her head. If I was doing this well, then the balance of power had shifted. She was no longer the only success story. In fact, compared to a directorship at a major fintech firm, her position as chair of the Heritage Committee looked quaint. She moved toward me. She pushed past Aunt Phyllis and wrapped her arms around me. It was a long hug. Too long. I felt her hands on my back. She was not just embracing me. She was assessing the fabric of my dress. She was feeling the tension in my posture. She was measuring me. It felt like a T.S. pat-down disguised as affection. I am so proud of you, Sissy, she whispered in my ear. Her voice was thick with sugar, but there was a metallic tang underneath it. We have so much to catch up on. You have been holding out on me. She pulled back, keeping her hands on my shoulders. Her eyes searched mine, looking for the lie, looking for the crack. When she didn't find one, her smile widened, but it didn't reach her eyes. We really need to talk, she said. Like, really talk. Nicholas, too. She glanced at Nicholas, who was standing just behind me, sipping his water. He met her gaze with a polite, impenetrable nod. He knew exactly what she was doing. He was watching a predator assess the size of the prey. I stepped back, breaking her hold. We are here all weekend, I said. Good, my father said, clapping his hands together. Good. We have some business to discuss. Actually, family business. Since you have a head for numbers now, as if I had not had a brain before my bank account hit a certain threshold. The party continued around us, but the dynamic had shattered. I was no longer the background noise. I was the signal, loud and clear. People were bringing me drinks. My mother was introducing me to people as my daughter, the director in Seattle. But as I looked around the circle of smiling, eager faces, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. I had wanted to be seen. I had wanted them to know I was someone. But as my father guided a local developer over to meet me, his hand heavy on my elbow, I realized the magnitude of my mistake. When you are invisible, you are safe. No one targets a ghost. But I had just turned on the lights. I had just announced to a room full of people who measured worth in dollars that I was the most valuable thing in the building. I caught Nicholas's eye across the rim of my glass. He didn't smile. He just raised an eyebrow slightly. A silent communication that spoke volumes. Here it comes. I had walked into the trap willingly. I had thought vindication would taste sweet, like victory. Instead, it tasted like blood in the water, and the sharks were already circling, wearing tuxedos and evening gowns, calling me sweetheart while they sharpened their teeth. The morning sun in Georgia does not gently wake you up. It interrogates you. It streams through the blinds with a relentless, blinding optimism that feels entirely at odds with the knot of dread tightening in my stomach. The day after the birthday party, my phone was already vibrating on the nightstand before I had even brushed my teeth. It was Blair. Coffee. Just the two of us. Found this cute place downtown. Need some sister time? I stared at the screen. Sister time. In the last decade. Our sister time had consisted of me liking her Facebook posts and her forgetting to call me back, but the dynamic had shifted. I was no longer the blurry figure in the background. I was the director. I was the cash offer. I was the signal. I agreed. Of course I agreed. The coffee shop was one of those places that tries very hard to look like it has been there for 100 years. Despite opening last Tuesday, exposed brick, Edison bulbs, and a barista with a mustache that required its own grooming budget. Blair was already seated at a corner table, looking effortlessly chic in oversized sunglasses and a linen jumpsuit. She waved me over with a frantic energy, like I was a celebrity she had just spotted. "Caroline." "Over here," she called out. I sat down. She had already ordered for me, an oat milk latte with 2 pumps of vanilla. It was exactly what I drank in college, 20 years ago. I drink black coffee now. But I didn't correct her. I just took the cup and let the warmth seep into my cold fingers. "It is so good to see you," she said, leaning across the table. "I mean, really see you. We get so busy. You know, life just swallows you whole." I nodded. "It does." I said. She sighed, a long, dramatic exhalation that ruffled her bangs. "You have no idea. People see the Instagram photos and they think, oh, Blair has it so easy, but it is exhausting. Carrie, the house costs a fortune to heat. The taxes in this county are criminal. And with the kids in private school, the tuition went up 12% this year. 12%. It is like they think we are printing money in the basement." I took a sip of the sugary latte. It tasted like nostalgia and manipulation. I watched her over the rim of the cup. This was the opening move. I recognized it from a dozen negotiations I had sat through. You establish rapport, you establish a pain point, and then you present the solution. "It sounds stressful," I said neutrally. "Stressful." "It is drowning," she corrected me. "We are fine, obviously. We are doing great. But sometimes I look at everything: the mortgage, the car payments, the club dues, and I just think, one bad month and the whole house of cards shakes. You know?" She looked at me with wide, imploring eyes. She was waiting for me to validate her struggle. She was waiting for me to say, "Oh, poor Blair. Let me help." I didn't say that. I said, "That is why Nicholas and I live below our means. It helps with the anxiety." Blair's smile flickered. "Right. Of course. You guys are so disciplined. That is smart. I wish I had your brain for these things." She took a bite of her croissant, crumbs falling onto the table. "That is actually why I wanted to talk to you. Not about my bills, God. No, just advice. Here it comes. I thought, there is this opportunity," she began, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "A duplex just outside of town. It is a wreck, but the bones are good. Brad. You know my friend Brad, the realtor. He says it is a gold mine for rental income, passive income. That is the dream, right? Making money while you sleep, just like you do with your stocks." I looked at her. She was using buzzwords she had probably heard on a podcast. Passive income, bones are good, so buy it. I said. She laughed, a nervous, brittle sound. "I want to, I really do. But our liquidity is all tied up in the house renovations right now, and the bank is being so slow with approvals. By the time they say yes, someone else will have snapped it up. It is only $40,000 for the down payment. $40,000. She said the number casually, as if she were asking to borrow a sweater. "I'm not asking for a handout," she added quickly, holding up her hands. "God. No, I am asking for a partnership. You put up the down payment. I manage the renovation and the tenants. We split the profit. It is an investment. For us. For the family." I looked at her. I saw the desperation behind the designer sunglasses. I saw a woman who was terrified that her lifestyle was outpacing her income, grasping for a lifeline that looked like a business deal. "Let me think about it," I said. I knew the answer should be no. Every risk algorithm in my brain was flashing red. High-risk partner, undefined terms, emotional leverage. But then she reached out and squeezed my hand. Her palm was warm. "I just want us to build something together." "Carrie," she said softly, "we never do anything together." That was the hook. She wasn't selling me a duplex. She was selling me the sisterhood I had craved since I was 6 years old. She was selling me the fantasy that I belonged at the table, not just as a spectator, but as a participant. I left the coffee shop with a promise to discuss it with Nicholas, but the assault was only beginning. By the time I got back to my parents' house, the ground had been prepared. My mother was in the kitchen, staring at a brochure for granite countertops. "Oh, Caroline, look at this." She sighed as I walked in. "Blue pearl granite. Isn't it stunning? I have wanted a kitchen like this my entire life. Your father says we have to wait another year, maybe 2. He is worried about his blood pressure medication costs." She let the sentence hang there. She didn't ask me to buy the granite. She just placed the desire and the obstacle in front of me, like a puzzle she knew I could solve. Then my father cornered me in the den. He was watching golf. The volume turned up too high. "Sit down, Caroline," he grunted. I sat. "Your mother worries too much," he said, keeping his eyes on the screen. "I am fine. The insurance covers most of it. There is just this gap. Couple thousand here and there for the specialists. It adds up. But we manage. We always manage. You know, I was looking at that article about your company. Stock is up 8% this quarter. Must be nice to be in an industry that prints money." He turned to look at me then. His eyes were heavy, tired, but sharp. "You have done good, kid. We are proud of you. I hope you know that. We don't say it enough, but we are." There it was, the validation, the words I had waited 38 years to hear. "We are proud of you," and all it cost was a couple $1,000s for specialists and a blue pearl granite countertop. I went upstairs to the guest room where Nicholas was packing our suitcases. I sat on the edge of the bed and told him everything. The duplex, the kitchen, the medical bills. He stopped folding a shirt. He turned to me, his face grim. "Caroline," he said quietly, "this is a subscription model. What? They are not asking for help. They are signing you up for a service. The service is called being part of the family. The monthly fee is whatever they need at the moment." "I know," I said. I lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling fan. "I know it is a transaction." "Then why are you considering it?" "Because," I whispered, "because for the first time, they are looking at me. They are texting me. They want me around. Even if it is just because I can pay for things, isn't that better than being invisible?" Nicholas sat down beside me. He took my hand. "No," he said, "it is not, because the moment you stop paying, you become invisible again. Actually, it is worse. You become the villain who cut them off." I squeezed his hand. "I know you are right, but I need to test it. I need to know for sure." I pulled out my phone. I opened my banking app. "I'm going to send Blair the money for the down payment." I said, "But not as a gift, as a loan, with a contract, and I am going to pay for Dad's insurance gap, directly to the provider." Nicholas watched me. "You are opening a door you might not be able to close." "I am not opening a door," I said, typing in the transfer details. "I am buying a ticket to the show. I want to see how the play ends." I hit transfer. $40,000, gone in a second. The reaction was immediate. Dopamine-inducing, explosive. My phone lit up like a slot machine. "OMG, Caroline. You are literally an angel," Blair texted. "I am crying right now. You saved us. We are going to be partners. Best sisters ever." Then came the group chat invitation. The Howard Family Fun Chat. I had never been in a group chat with them before. Suddenly, I was added. My mother posted a gif of a dancing cat. "Welcome home. Honey." My father posted a thumbs-up emoji. Good teamwork. For the next week, I was love-bombed. That is the only term for it. It was an assault of affection. I received photos of my nieces and nephews with captions like, "Auntie Caroline needs to see this." I received links to articles about the Seattle housing market with notes saying, "Thinking of you every morning." There was a good morning text. Every evening, a sleep tight. It felt good. I cannot lie. It felt warm. It felt like I had finally cracked the code. All those years of being the background noise, I just hadn't been broadcasting on the right frequency. The frequency was money. But the analyst in me, the woman who hunts for fraud, could not turn off her brain. I started a folder on my laptop. I named it Project Family. Every text message asking for something. I screenshotted and saved. "Hey, can you look at this contractor quote for the duplex? Seems high? Maybe you can pay it and we adjust the split. Carrie, Mom's car is making a weird noise. Do you think it is safe for her to drive?" Repairs are so pricey, I logged every dollar I sent. I logged the date, the time, and the emotional context. Date, October 12th. Amount $200. Reason Blair's daughter needed emergency dance shoes. Context sent after Blair told me I was the only aunt who really understood artistic passion. I was building a data set. I was tracking the correlation between cash flow and affection flow. The graph was a perfect, upward sloping line. As long as the money moved, the love moved. But there was a coldness to it, a hollowness. When we talked on the phone, they never asked about my day. They never asked about Nicholas's job. They never asked how I felt about the rain in Seattle. They asked about the transfer times. They asked if I had seen the email about the new roof estimate. They asked if my company was hiring remote consultants because a cousin needed a job. I was not a person. I was a portal to a better lifestyle. And then, things got weird. It happened on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after the party. I was at my desk at Ravenport, staring at a complex schematic of a money laundering ring in Estonia. When my LinkedIn notification pinged, it was a request to connect. I clicked on it, expecting a headhunter or a vendor. I froze. The profile photo was me. It was a photo I had never posted publicly. It was a cropped version of a picture taken at the Oakhaven River Club party. I was holding a glass of champagne. Looking off to the side, I looked wealthy. I looked important. But the name on the profile was not Caroline Howard. The name was CH Consulting. The tagline read, Wealth Management/Family Asset Strategy, Principal Advisor. I clicked on the profile. It was brand new. It had 0 connections, but it had a bio. Specializing in high net worth portfolio diversification and secure asset leveraging, based in Savannah and Seattle. My heart hammered against my ribs. Savannah/Seattle. Someone was using my face. Someone was using my credentials. My implied credentials to build a business entity I knew nothing about. I looked closer at the contact info. There was no email address, just a link to a website that was currently under construction. But there was a phone number listed for inquiries. I recognized the area code. It was 912. Savannah. I didn't call the number. I didn't need to. I knew that if I called it, the voice on the other end would be familiar. I sat back in my ergonomic chair, the air in my office suddenly feeling very thin. This was not just about getting me to pay for a duplex. This was not just about a kitchen renovation. This was identity theft. This was impersonation. Nicholas had warned me. He said I feared them seeing what they could take. But even he hadn't predicted this. They weren't just taking my money. They were taking me. They were taking the reputation I had built over 15 years of grinding in the dark, and they were wearing it like a costume to run a con. I looked at the Accept Connection button. I didn't click it. Instead, I took a screenshot. I saved it to the Project Family folder. Then I opened the Howard Family Fun Chat. Blair. Hey sissy, just wondering if you saw that email about the landscaping fees. Love you. I stared at the heart emoji. It looked less like love and more like a target. I typed back, checking it now. I was not going to scream. I was not going to cry. I was Caroline Howard, Senior Director of Global Fraud Investigations, and I had just identified a new suspect. I picked up my phone and called our internal legal counsel. Hey, David, I said, keeping my voice steady, I have a hypothetical for you. If someone were to impersonate a financial officer to solicit investments, what kind of felony are we looking at? I swiveled my chair to look out at the rain washing over Seattle. The love bombing was over. The investigation had begun. The phone call that dismantled my life did not come during a storm or in the dead of night. It came on a Tuesday evening, just as the sun was setting over the Olympic Mountains, painting the sky in bruises of purple and gold. I was chopping vegetables for dinner. The rhythmic thud-thud-thud of the knife against the wooden board providing a sense of order that I found soothing, when the screen lit up with the name Grandma Maris. I wiped my hands on a towel and smiled. Maris Doyle was the only person in my family who had ever sent me a birthday card that didn't contain a request or a backhanded compliment. She was 82, sharp as a tack, and lived in a small cottage on the edge of the family estate, largely ignored by Darlene and Hank unless they needed her to sign a document regarding the trust. I answered on the second ring. "Hey, Grandma, everything okay?" There was a pause. It wasn't the silence of a bad connection. It was the heavy, static-filled silence of someone gathering the courage to break a heart. "Caroline," she said. Her voice was thin, shaking slightly. "Are you alone?" I stopped moving. I put the knife down. "Yes, I am. Nicholas is in the study. What is wrong? Is it Dad?" "No," she said quickly. "No, everyone is fine. Physically, they are fine." I leaned against the granite counter, the cold stone pressing into my lower back. "Maris, you are scaring me." "What is it I need to tell you something?" she said, and I could hear the creak of her rocking chair in the background. "I need to tell you something before you sign anything else, before you send any more help." My stomach turned over. I had just wired $5,000 yesterday for a roof repair on the duplex that Blair was supposedly buying. I was at the house on Sunday. Maris continued. "For the barbecue. They didn't know I was in the sunroom. The door was open. Just a crack. They were out on the patio, drinking that expensive wine you sent. I waited. The air in the kitchen felt suddenly thin. Hard to breathe. Your mother was laughing," Maris said. "She was telling your father that the new kitchen counters were going to be installed next month. Hank asked how they were paying for the labor. I closed my eyes. I knew what was coming, but I needed to hear it, and I whispered. And Darlene said, 'Don't worry about it. Caroline is feeling guilty again. She is making up for lost time.' That hurt. But it was a dull ache. I could handle being the guilt-ridden daughter. That was a role I knew. But Maris wasn't finished. 'There is more, honey,' she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Blair was there. She was laughing the hardest. She said Maris stopped. I could hear her take a ragged breath. 'Tell me,' I said. My voice was flat. 'I need to know.' 'Maris,' Blair said, 'it is almost too easy. She thinks she is loved. She is just being hired.' The world did not stop spinning. The lights did not flicker. The only physical reaction I had was a sensation of absolute coldness starting at the base of my neck and spreading slowly down my spine. It was the temperature of a morgue. She thinks she is loved. She is just being hired. It was a sentence so precise, so surgically cruel, that it could only have come from someone who knew exactly where my insecurities lived. Blair knew that my entire life had been a quest to be included. She knew that I had spent decades standing outside the glass, fogging it up with my breath, just wanting someone to open the door. And she had opened the door, not to let me in, but to take my wallet and push me back out. I did not cry. That surprised me. I expected tears, or rage, or the hyperventilating panic that used to seize me when I was a child and realized I had been left behind at the school pickup. But there was none of that. Instead, there was a strange, crystalline clarity. It was the feeling I got when I finally found the hidden variable in a complex fraud scheme. The chaos vanished, and the pattern emerged. Caroline Maris asked, her voice terrified. "Are you still there?" "I am here," I said. My voice sounded mechanical, like a recording. "Thank you, Grandma. I am so sorry." She wept. "I didn't raise them to be like this. I don't know where they got it from. They got it from the world. Maris," I said, "they learned that value is external. Go to sleep. I will call you next week." I hung up the phone and placed it gently on the counter. I stood there for a long time, looking at the half-chopped bell peppers. They looked ridiculous, bright, cheerful, and completely irrelevant. Nicholas walked into the kitchen a few minutes later. He was holding an empty mug, coming for a refill. He stopped in the doorway. He didn't say a word. He just looked at me. He is a man who reads micro-expressions for a living, but he didn't need his training to see this. I must have looked like a statue. "What happened?" he asked quietly. I turned to him. I told him. I repeated the sentence exactly as Maris had said it. Without inflection, without wavering. She thinks she is loved. She is just being hired. Nicholas didn't smash his mug. He didn't shout. He didn't curse my family. He walked over to me, took the knife from the cutting board, and moved it to the sink. Then he took my hands. His hands were warm. Mine were ice. He looked into my eyes, and I saw a deep, profound sadness there. It wasn't pity. It was the sadness of witnessing a necessary tragedy. "How clear do you want to see?" he asked. It was a strange question, but I knew what he meant. He was asking if I wanted to stop at the hurt, or if I wanted to go all the way to the truth. He was asking if I wanted to be the victim, or the analyst. "I want to see everything." I said, "I want to see the bottom." Then we stopped the signal. He said. I nodded. I did not block their numbers. I did not send a furious email detailing their betrayal. I did not confront Blair about the sentence that was currently burning a hole in my chest. To do that would be to give them an emotional reaction. And emotions are messy. They can be spun. If I got angry, they would call me hysterical. They would say I misunderstood. They would gaslight me until I apologized for being offended. No, I needed data. I needed to prove the hypothesis. If I am an employee, I thought, then let's see what happens when the payroll department shuts down. The next morning, the test began. My phone pinged at 10 o'clock. It was my mother, Carrie. "Honey, the contractor is here for the kitchen measurement. He needs a deposit to lock in the price for the granite. Can you Venmo $2,500 today?" Thanks, I looked at the text. Usually, I would have sent the money within 5 minutes, followed by a text saying, "Done, so excited for you." Instead, I waited 3 hours, then I typed, "Hey Mom, sorry for the delay. Work is crazy. I can't do the transfer right now. My accounts are under a routine compliance audit because of a deal we are closing. Everything is frozen for 48 hours. I will let you know when it clears." It was a lie, but it was a plausible one. It was the kind of bureaucratic excuse that people who don't understand high finance accept without question. The response was instantaneous. "Frozen, what does that mean?" "The guy is standing here. Caroline. He says he can't hold the slab without a deposit." I replied, "I know. It is annoying. Corporate policy. Nothing I can do. Maybe you can put it on a credit card and I will reimburse you next week." Silence. Long, heavy silence. My parents did not use their own credit cards for things like this. Credit cards left a paper trail of debt that they had to service. They preferred my money, which came with 0 interest and 0 obligation. 2 hours later, Blair texted, "Hey, Mom is freaking out about the kitchen. Is everything okay? Also, I need to pay the inspector for the duplex tomorrow. $500. Can you send that to my PayPal?" I kept the tone light, friendly, helpful. "Hey, Blair. So sorry. Like I told Mom, my accounts are locked for a compliance check. Total headache. I can't move a penny until legal clears the new portfolio. Probably by Friday. Can you float it until then?" I watched the 3 dots of her typing bubble appear, then disappear, then appear again. "I don't have 500 liquid right now. Carrie, I paid for the kids' tuition yesterday. Can't you just use a different account? Or Nicholas's account?" I stared at the screen. She didn't ask if I was in trouble. She didn't ask if the audit was serious. She suggested I use my husband's money to pay for her investment property inspection. "Nicholas and I keep our finances separate for tax reasons." I lied. "I will let you know as soon as I can." The shift in the atmosphere was subtle at first, then rapid. It was like watching a flower wilt in time-lapse photography. For the first 2 days, they kept up the facade. They sent generic memes. They asked, "How is the audit going?" But the subtext was clearly, "When do we get paid?" by day 4. The tone changed. My father sent a text. "This is ridiculous. Caroline, I have never heard of a bank freezing personal assets for a work issue. You need to call your boss. Your mother is very upset about the kitchen delay." I looked at the message. Your mother is very upset. Not, "We are worried about you." Not, "Is your job safe?" Just annoyance that the service had been interrupted. I replied, "I am doing my best. Dad, it is out of my hands." Day 6, the weekend. Usually. This was when the love bombing peaked. This was when I got the photos of the Sunday roast I was missing. My phone was silent all day. At 7 in the evening, A text from Blair. So I guess the duplex is off. The seller is walking. Thanks a lot. No love you. No sister time. Just the sharp, stinging snap of a transaction failing. I sat on my balcony, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the ferry boats crossing the dark water of the Sound. I had my answer. I had my data. I had removed the variable of money, and the equation had collapsed. I realized then that the Caroline they had been texting, the sister they had been hugging, the daughter they had been praising, she didn't exist. She was just a projection. I was an ATM with a face, and when the ATM stopped dispensing cash, they didn't kick it to see if it was broken. They just walked away to find another source of funds. Nicholas came out and sat beside me. He handed me a glass of water. "How is the experiment going?" he asked. I showed him the text from Blair. "Thanks a lot." He read it and nodded. He handed the phone back to me. "I feel light," I said, and that was the truth. I expected to feel devastated. I expected to feel the crushing weight of rejection. But instead, I felt the lightness of a burden being lifted. I realized that I didn't have to try anymore. I didn't have to perform. I didn't have to buy my way into the room, because there was no room. It was just a toll booth. They are not mad that I'm gone. I told Nicholas. They are mad that the subscription expired. "So what do we do now?" he asked. "Now," I said, looking at the city lights. "Now we stop lying." I told them my accounts were frozen. Let's make that true. I picked up my phone. I didn't text them. I opened my banking app. I canceled the standing order for the monthly gift to my parents. I removed Blair as an authorized user on the emergency credit card I had foolishly given her number to, just in case. Then I opened my email. I found the draft I had written to the real estate agent regarding the duplex. I deleted it. The silence from Georgia was deafening. It was the sound of a vacuum where affection was supposed to be. But for the first time in my life, the silence didn't make me feel small. It made me feel safe. I was no longer being hired. And that meant I could no longer be fired. I had quit. The summons for the holiday gathering arrived with the subtlety of a court order disguised as a Hallmark card. It was technically an invitation for the annual year-end family dinner, a tradition my parents had sporadically enforced whenever they felt their social standing needed a fresh coat of paint. But this year, the messaging was aggressive. My mother called 3 times in one afternoon. Blair sent a calendar invite to my work email, a personal email, and even texted a screenshot of the date to Nicholas. The subject line was always the same. Family must be together. It was a strategic pivot. After I had cut off the financial supply line by claiming my accounts were frozen. They had gone silent. Now, they were re-engaging. They were changing tactics from direct extraction to emotional siege. Blair began sending me photos of the preparations. They were curated vignettes of domestic perfection. One photo showed the dining room table set with the good china, the plates we were never allowed to touch as children, flanked by crystal goblets and heavy silverware. Another showed a stack of handwritten place cards, my name written in swirling calligraphy next to Nicholas's. Look, the caption read, "Mom bought those expensive French taper candles you love. The ones that smell like fig and cedar. We are going all out. It cost a fortune. But you are worth it." I stared at the phone. It cost a fortune. Even in the lure. She couldn't help but remind me of the price tag. She was priming the pump. She was establishing the debt before I even stepped on the plane. I turned to Nicholas. "We do not have to go." I said, "We can stay here. We can order Thai food and watch movies and turn off our phones." Nicholas was packing his suitcase. He folded a gray sweater with precise engineering movements. "No," he said, "if we don't go, they win. They get to paint you as the cold, distant daughter who abandoned them in their time of need. They get to control the narrative." I sat on the edge of the bed. "So we go there to what be props. We go there to observe," he said. He looked up at me. "You said you wanted to see the bottom. Caroline, you can't see the bottom from 2,000 miles away. You have to stand on the edge." He was right. But if I was going into the lion's den, I was not going in unarmed. 2 days before our flight, I took a personal day from Ravenport Risk Dynamics. I did not spend it shopping for outfits or getting a manicure. I spent it securing my digital perimeter. I called all 3 major credit bureaus and placed a freeze on my credit reports. I set up 2-factor authentication on every single account I owned, linking them to a burner phone number that my family did not have. I even scheduled a brief, off-the-record coffee with a colleague from our legal department. Hypothetically, I asked her, stirring my black coffee, if a family member attempts to use a relative's identity to secure a loan or a business license, what is the best preemptive defense? She looked at me over her glasses. Document everything, she said, and check the Secretary of State's business registry. If they are bold enough to use your name, they are usually dumb enough to file the paperwork. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Seattle rain. I was preparing for a family dinner like it was a hostile corporate takeover. When I packed our gifts, I made a conscious choice. In previous years, I would have agonized over these gifts. I would have bought my father a $2,000 watch or my mother a designer handbag, hoping that the price tag would buy me a few months of approval. This time, I went to a local artisan market. I bought my mother a beautiful, hand-thrown ceramic vase. I bought my father a first edition of a history book he had mentioned once. I bought Blair a set of silk pillowcases. They were thoughtful, elegant gifts, but they were not liquid assets. You could not return them for a stack of cash. You could not leverage them for a loan. They were just gifts. They were a period at the end of a sentence, signaling that the era of Caroline the Bank was over. We landed in Georgia under a sky the color of a bruise. The air was heavy and wet. My father picked us up at the airport in his Lincoln. The moment I saw him, I knew something was different. Usually, he would wait in the car and pop the trunk. This time, he was standing at the curb. He hugged me. He actually hugged me, pulling me in tight enough that I could smell the starch on his collar and the faint, sweet scent of bourbon. "Caroline," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "My girl, it is so good to have you home." He shook Nicholas's hand with both of his hands. "Nicholas, good to see you." "Son, really good. We have a lot to talk about." The drive to the house was filled with chatter. My father asked about the weather in Seattle. He asked about the flight. He asked if I was tired. He did not ask about my frozen accounts. He did not ask about the kitchen renovation money I had failed to send. It was as if that awkward week of rejected transfers had never happened. We were pretending. We were all actors on a set, hitting our marks. When we walked into the house, the warmth was overwhelming. The fireplace was roaring. Despite it being 60 degrees outside, the smell of roasting ham and cinnamon filled the hallway. Blair came running from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron that looked suspiciously clean, as if she had put it on just for this entrance. She threw her arms around me. "Carrie, you are here." She held the hug for 5 seconds, 10 seconds. It was a clingy, desperate embrace. It felt less like affection, and more like she was checking to make sure I was real, that I hadn't dissolved into a digital ghost. "We missed you so much," she whispered. I patted her back. "I am here now," I said. The evening proceeded with a terrifying level of perfection. My mother had cooked all my favorite foods. There was pecan pie. There were collard greens with ham hocks. There was a bottle of wine that I knew cost $80. They sat me at the head of the table. "So, Caroline," my mother said, spooning mashed potatoes onto my plate, "tell us about this big project you are working on, the one that kept you so busy last week." She said busy instead of broke. She was giving me an out. She was rewriting the narrative of my refusal to pay into a narrative of me being an important, overworked executive. "It is going well," I said, taking a sip of wine. "Complex, but we are managing the risk. And Nicholas," my father cut in, turning his gaze to my husband, "we never really talk about your work. Structural engineering, right?" "Yes, sir," Nicholas said. "That must be steady work," my father said, nodding. "Lucrative, too, in a city like Seattle. Do you work for a firm, or are you independent?" "I work for a firm," Nicholas said. "Partner?" my father asked. "Senior associate," Nicholas replied. "And liabilities?" My father asked the question casually, as if asking if he wanted more gravy. "You guys own that condo free and clear." right? Caroline mentioned a cash offer. That means no mortgage, no liens. I stopped chewing. The fork felt heavy in my hand. He wasn't making conversation. He was building a balance sheet. He was trying to determine if Nicholas was a separate entity with his own assets, or if our wealth was commingled and therefore accessible through me. It is in a trust. I lied, smoothly, calmly. We put everything in a blind trust for liability reasons. Because of the nature of my work investigating fraud, we have to keep our assets shielded. My father's eyes flickered. A trust. That sounds complicated. Who manages the trust? A third party, Nicholas said. It is very secure. The table went quiet for a moment. I saw Blair exchange a look with my mother. It was a micro-expression, a quick dart of the eyes that said, Plan B. Well, that is smart, my mother said. Her voice too loud. Very smart. You can never be too careful. That is exactly what we were saying. Wasn't it? Blair. That Caroline is so careful. Yes, Blair said. She smiled at me. Her teeth were very white. So careful. That is why we need her. The phrasing made the hair on my arm stand up. That is why we need her. Not love her, need her. I excused myself to go to the bathroom. I needed to breathe. I needed to splash cold water on my face and wash off the feeling of being appraised like livestock. On my way back from the bathroom, I took a detour through the kitchen. The main dinner was happening in the dining room, so the kitchen was empty, or it should have been. I walked in to get a glass of water from the fridge. The room was a disaster of cooking pots piled in the sink, flour on the counter, but on the small breakfast table in the corner, the one where we used to eat cereal before school, there was a neat stack of papers. They were in a blue presentation folder, the kind you get from a lawyer or a bank. I walked over to it. I didn't touch it. I just leaned in. The cover page was half covered by a dish towel, but I could see the logo of a local lending institution, Savannah River Capital. And sticking out from the side was a yellow sticky note. It had my name on it. Signer 2. Caroline Howard. Collateral unsecured / personal guarantee. My heart stopped. Personal guarantee. In the world of finance, a personal guarantee is the blood oath. It means that if the business fails, if the loan isn't paid, the bank doesn't just take the business assets. They come for your house. They come for your savings. They come for your future. I reached out to lift the towel. Just then, the door from the dining room swung open. My mother bustled in, carrying a dirty serving platter. She stopped dead when she saw me standing by the table. Her eyes darted to the blue folder. She moved faster than I had seen her move in 20 years. She dropped the platter into the sink with a loud clatter and rushed over to the table. She scooped up the folder and the towel in one motion, clutching them to her chest. Caroline. She laughed, a breathless, high-pitched sound. You startled me. I didn't know you were in here. I looked at her hands. Her knuckles were white around the blue folder. What is that, Mom? I asked. She took a step back. Nothing. Just boring house stuff. Dad's insurance papers. Boring. You don't want to see this. Go back in the dining room. Blair was just telling a funny story about the dog. She was backing away from me, moving toward the pantry. She looked terrified, not the terror of a mother caught with a surprise gift, but the terror of a child caught with a stolen candy bar. I looked at her. I looked at the folder she was hiding like a shameful secret. It is not insurance papers, I said quietly. I saw my name. My mother froze. Her face went slack. For a second, the mask slipped, and I saw the calculation underneath. It is for your own good, she whispered. It is an opportunity. Caroline, we were going to surprise you. Surprise me with a loan application, I asked. We were going to ask you after dessert, she said, her voice gaining a defensive edge. It is just a formality. The bank just needs a co-signer with a strong credit profile, just to get the rate down. Blair has a wonderful business plan, a consulting firm. It is going to be huge. We just need your name. Just your name. You won't have to pay a dime. Just your name. The realization hit me like a physical blow. The LinkedIn profile, the CH, consulting, The questions about Nicholas's assets, the probing about the trust. They weren't just asking for money anymore. They were done asking. They were preparing to leverage my identity. They had likely already filled out the application. They just needed the signature. Or maybe they didn't even plan to ask for the signature. Maybe they just practiced my signature enough times to make it look convincing. I stepped back. I felt sick. I am going back to the table. I said, Caroline, wait, my mother hissed. Don't make a scene. Not tonight. It is the holidays. I turned around and walked out of the kitchen. I walked back into the dining room. My father was pouring more wine. Blair was laughing. Nicholas looked up at me. He saw my face. He put his napkin down instantly. I sat down. I picked up my fork. Caroline Blair asked, You look pale. Are you okay? I looked at her. I looked at the sister who had texted me sister time while plotting to shackle me to a debt I didn't incur. I am fine. I said, I cut a piece of ham. My mother came back into the room. She didn't look at me. She sat down and took a large gulp of wine. So, my father boomed, Who is ready for presents? I chewed the ham. It tasted like ash. I knew now. I knew exactly what the game was. They weren't just parasites feeding on a host. They were body snatchers. They wanted to wear my skin, use my name, and spend my credit until there was nothing left but a husk. And the terrifying part was, they truly believed they were entitled to it. They believed that my success was a family resource, like a shared driveway or a communal well. I swallowed the food. I took a sip of water. I am ready, I said. I was ready, but not for presents. I was ready to burn the stage down. The transition from the dining room to the living room felt less like a family moving between courses and more like a jury retiring to deliberate a verdict. The air was thick with the scent of pine needles and unsaid things. My mother, Darlene, orchestrated the movement with nervous energy. She clapped her hands together, a sharp, brittle sound that made the dog flinch under the table. Let's have coffee in the den, she announced. It is more comfortable. We can really talk. She said talk the way a shark might say, bite. We moved to the plush beige sofas that had been upholstered 3 times in my life. Always in lighter shades, as if my mother believed she could bleach the dysfunction out of the fabric. I sat next to Nicholas on the love seat. My parents took the large sofa. Blair pulled up an ottoman, positioning herself lower than us, looking up with wide, innocent eyes. It was a tactical seating arrangement. It was designed to make her look vulnerable and me look authoritative, the benevolent queen bestowing favor upon the peasant. My father cleared his throat. He held a glass of brandy that he swirled rhythmically. So, he began, his voice dropping to that confidential baritone he used when trying to sell a policy that didn't quite cover everything. We wanted to discuss the future, your future, Caroline, and ours, the legacy of this family. I folded my hands in my lap. I did not reach for the coffee. I wanted my hands free. Blair leaned forward. Her hands were clasped together, her knuckles white. You know how hard Rick has been working. She said, The dealership is well. The market is shifting. Everyone is buying online. He needs a pivot. We all do. This consulting firm. It is not just a little project. It is our exit strategy. It is how we stay afloat. It is a sure thing. My father added, a very safe investment vehicle. We have the clients lined up. We have the location. We just need the capital injection to satisfy the bank's risk ratios. The risk ratios. He was using my language now. He was throwing my own terminology at me like treats to a dog, hoping I would snap them up. And, my mother interjected, her voice sugary and trembling, we thought it would be such a beautiful way to bring you back into the fold. Caroline, you have been so far away, in Seattle, alone. If you are a partner, a silent partner, of course, you are too busy to run it, then you are part of the team. You are helping your sister build a life. Isn't that what family does? She looked at me with wet, shimmering eyes. It was a masterclass in manipulation, the guilt, the flattery, the obligation. Blair nodded eagerly. And it is not like we are asking for cash. Carrie, we know your accounts are complicated right now. We just need your credit profile, your guarantee. It is just a signature, a formality. The bank just wants to see a strong name on the paper. I looked at them. I looked at the three of them, sitting there in the soft lamplight, surrounded by the trappings of a successful life they could not afford. They looked at me with hunger. Not a violent hunger, but a parasitic one. They wanted to attach themselves to my vitality and drain it until they were full and I was empty. I let the silence stretch. I let it pull tight like a wire across the room. Then I spoke. My voice was not loud. It was the voice I used when I had to tell a CEO that his CFO was embezzling funds. "Do you remember the barbecue?" I asked. The question hung in the air, incongruous and sharp. Blair blinked. "What the barbecue?" I repeated. "Last month. The one you had on the patio. The one Grandma Maris was at." The reaction was immediate and visceral. It was as if I had fired a gun into the ceiling. My mother's face drained of color, turning a sickly gray against her heavy makeup. She put her coffee cup down on the coaster with a rattle. Blair went rigid, her posture locking up as if her spine had fused. My father, who had been looking me in the eye, suddenly found the pattern on the Persian rug fascinating. They knew exactly what I was talking about. "I don't know what you mean," my mother said, her voice climbing an octave. "We have barbecues all the time. I think you know this one." I said, "It was the one where you discussed my success. It was the one where you laughed about how easy I was to manipulate." I looked directly at Blair. "You said, 'She thinks she is loved. She is just being hired.'" The silence that followed was not the silence of confusion. It was the silence of guilt. It was the silence of a conspiracy being exposed under harsh fluorescent lights. Blair's mouth opened and closed. She looked at our mother for help, but Darlene was staring at her hands. "That is taken out of context," Blair stammered. Her face flushed a deep, ugly red. "You know how Grandma is. She gets confused. She hears things wrong. Her hearing aid is always whistling. She didn't hear it wrong." I said, "I didn't ask a question. I stated a fact." My mother let out a nervous, high-pitched laugh. "Oh, Caroline, honestly, you are being dramatic. It was a joke. People say things when they are stressed. We were just venting. You know how much pressure we are under. We didn't mean it. It was just talk. Just talk." I repeated. "So when you said I was being hired, you meant what, exactly? That my value to this family is quantifiable. That I am a service provider now." "Hold on," my father said, finding his voice. He tried to muster some of his patriarchal authority, but it was hollow. "You are twisting this. We love you. You are our daughter. But let's be realistic. Caroline, you have done very well for yourself. Very well. And your sister, she hasn't had your luck." "Luck," I said. "You think 15 years of working 80-hour weeks is luck?" "That is not the point," my father snapped. "The point is, you have it, and she doesn't. And in a family, the strong carry the weak. That is how it works. That is the contract. The contract. Finally, the truth." I stood up. The movement was sudden enough that my mother flinched. I walked over to the fireplace. I looked at the stockings hung with care. I looked at the photos on the mantel, all of Blair. None of me. "There is no contract," I said, turning to face them. "Not anymore. I am not signing the papers," I said. My mother stood up. "Caroline, please, think about this. I am not signing the papers," I repeated. "I am not giving you $40,000. I am not co-signing a loan for a consulting firm that is using my identity without my permission." They froze again. They hadn't realized I knew about the website. "I know about CH Consulting," I said. "I have screenshots. I have the domain registration. I know you used my photo. I know you used my credentials." My father's face went purple. "We did that for you," he shouted. "We were building a legacy in your name. You were building a fraud in my name." I cut him off. My voice finally rose, filling the room. "You were going to take out loans against my credit, run up debts, and when the business failed because it would fail. Blair, Because you don't know the first thing about wealth management, the bank would come for me. They would come for my house. They would come for my license. I looked at Nicholas. He was watching me, his eyes fierce and proud. So here's the new reality. I said, I am deleting the project. If that website is not down by tomorrow morning, I will have my legal team file a cease and desist against my own father. Caroline, my mother screamed. You wouldn't. Try me, I said. And as for the money, I continued, the faucet is off. No more tuition, no more renovations, no more gap insurance. If you need money, sell the house, sell the cars, live the life you can actually afford. Blair stood up. She was trembling, but not with fear, with rage. The mask of the sweet, struggling sister dissolved, revealing the spoiled, entitled child underneath. You selfish bitch, she spat. The words hung in the air, vibrating. You think you are so better than us? She hissed. You come here with your designer clothes and your Seattle attitude, judging us. You owe us this. You left. You abandoned us for 10 years. We stayed here. We took care of Mom and Dad while you were off playing corporate big shot. You owe us for the time you weren't here. I looked at her. I looked at the venom in her eyes. It wasn't about love. It had never been about love. It was about reparations. She believed I had to pay a tax for escaping. I don't owe you for my freedom, Blair, I said, and I don't owe you for staying. You didn't stay to take care of them. You stayed because you were afraid to leave. She lunged forward, as if she wanted to slap me. But my father caught her arm. Enough, he roared. He looked at me. His eyes were cold, hard. If you walk out that door without signing. Caroline, don't bother coming back. We don't need people who don't support this family. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had ignored me at my graduation. The man who had forgotten my name in front of his boss. The man who only hugged me when he thought I was bringing a check. I know, I said. You don't need a daughter. You need a co-signer. And the position has been filled. Nicholas stood up. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. He buttoned his jacket. He walked over to me and placed a hand on the small of my back. It was a grounding touch, a reminder that I had a family. Just not in this room. We are leaving, Nicholas said. His voice was calm, deep, and final. He walked to the front door and opened it. The cold night air rushed in, sweeping away the scent of pine and stagnation. My mother started to cry. It was a loud, wailing sound. It was the sound of a woman realizing her retirement plan was walking out the door. Caroline, she sobbed, you are breaking this family apart. No. Mom, I said, pausing at the threshold. I am just refusing to pay for the glue. I walked out. I didn't look back at the house. I didn't look back at the Lincoln in the driveway or the wreath on the door. I walked straight to our rental car. Nicholas opened the passenger door for me. I slid in. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of amputation. I had just cut off a limb to save the body. Nicholas got in the driver's seat. He started the car. He didn't ask if I was okay. He knew I wasn't okay yet, but he knew I would be. As we pulled out of the driveway, my phone buzzed. I thought about ignoring it. I thought it would be a hateful text from Blair or a guilt trip from my mother. But it wasn't. It was a text from Maris. I saw the lights go off in the den. I assume you told them. I typed back I did. The response came a moment later. You aren't cruel. Caroline, you just stopped letting people borrow your life. Drive safe. I put the phone down. I leaned my head back against the seat and watched the dark trees of Georgia blur past the window. I was 38 years old, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for anyone to call my name. I had called it myself. The silence that followed our departure from Georgia lasted exactly 19 days. It was a heavy, pressurized silence, the kind that exists in the split second between a flash of lightning and the crack of thunder. I returned to Seattle, returned to my desk at Ravenport Risk Dynamics, and tried to convince myself that the worst was over. I told myself that by refusing to sign the papers, I had stopped the bleeding. I thought I had erected a wall they could not climb. I was wrong. I had not built a wall. I had simply forced them to dig a tunnel. The first tremor hit on a Thursday afternoon. I was in a quarterly review meeting, analyzing a heat map of transaction anomalies in the Asian Pacific market. When my phone vibrated against the mahogany table, it was not a text. It was a push notification from my identity protection service. Alert new hard inquiry. Detected. I frowned. A hard inquiry only happens when you are actively applying for credit, a mortgage, a car loan, a new credit card. I was doing none of those things. I slid the phone into my lap and unlocked it. Institution Savannah Regional Credit Union. Amount requested, $50,000. Applicant Caroline Howard Whitman. I froze. Howard Whitman. I had never hyphenated my name. I kept Howard for professional reasons, and legally I was a Bramwell. Howard Whitman was a fabrication, a hybrid name that sounded prestigious, old money, and entirely fake. I excused myself from the meeting. I walked out into the corridor, the glass walls of the conference room muffling the sound of my heels on the polished concrete. I called the credit bureau immediately. This is a fraudulent inquiry. I told the agent, my voice clipped and professional. I did not authorize this. Lock the report. I did. Ma'am, the agent said, but you should know. The applicant had your social security number and your previous address, the one on Willow Creek Lane. That was the house I grew up in. My parents' house. I felt a cold prickle of sweat on the back of my neck. They were trying to bypass the freezes I had put on my current address by using an old one, hoping the system's legacy data would create a match. It was a clumsy amateur move, but it showed intent. They were not just asking anymore. They were taking. I went back to my desk. My focus shattered. I opened my email to distract myself. And that was when the second blow landed. It was an email from Marcus Thorne. Marcus was a venture capitalist I had worked with 5 years ago on a fraud case involving a startup in Silicon Valley. We hadn't spoken since, other than the occasional LinkedIn like. Subject, congrats on the new firm. My stomach dropped. I clicked the email. Hey Caroline, just saw the announcement for CH. Consulting. Bold move stepping out on your own, especially with that family office angle. I have a client in Atlanta who needs exactly what you are pitching: asset protection for generational wealth. Let's connect. I stared at the screen. Asset protection for generational wealth. The irony would have been funny if it weren't terrifying. I typed back immediately. Marcus, I am still at Ravenport. I have no new firm. Can you send me the link you saw? He replied 30 seconds later with a URL. I clicked it. The page loaded with a slick, high-resolution animation of a lighthouse beaming light over a stormy sea. The design was expensive. It was polished. And right there, under the banner, CH Consulting Securing Your Legacy, was my face. It was a professional headshot I had taken for a Ravenport annual report 3 years ago. Next to it was a biography that was a mix of truth and absolute fiction. Caroline Howard, co-founder and principal strategist, with over 15 years of experience leading global risk investigations. Caroline brings institutional-grade security to family investments. And next to my name was another photo, my father, Hank Howard, Henry Howard, senior partner, 40 years of business excellence in the Georgia market. I scrolled down. The services listed were vague but buzzy: wealth optimization, strategic leveraging, blind trust management. It was a Ponzi scheme wrapper. It was a lure designed to trap local business owners who trusted my father's handshake but wanted the security of my resume. I scrolled to the bottom of the page for the contact info. There was no physical address, just a P.O. box in Savannah, and a phone number. I knew that number. It was my father's cell phone. I didn't think. I didn't strategize. I picked up my desk phone and dialed. It rang twice. Howard Associates. A voice boomed. Hank speaking. He answered it like a business line. He answered it as if he had been waiting for a client to call with a checkbook in hand. Dad, I said. There was a pause, a hesitation. Then, his voice shifted, dropping the professional baritone for a weary, defensive tone. Caroline, I am in a meeting. You are not in a meeting. I said, You are answering a phone number listed on a fraudulent website that names me as a co-founder of a company I do not own. He sighed. It sounded impatient. It is not fraudulent. Caroline, it is a soft launch. We are just testing the market. You are using my photo. I said, my voice rising. You are using my credentials. You are using my name to solicit money. That is a felony. Dad, that is wire fraud. That is identity theft. Stop using those words, he snapped. You are family. You are part of this whether you like it or not. We gave you that name. You didn't build that reputation in a vacuum. Caroline, you built it because we raised you to be sharp. We are just leveraging the asset. I felt like the floor was tilting. He truly believed it. He believed that my career was a family asset, like a vacation home or a riding lawnmower, that he could borrow whenever he needed it. Take it down. I said, take the site down now. We can't, he said. And for the first time, I heard a trace of panic under the bluster. We paid a developer $3,000 to build it. We already sent the link to the investors at the club. If we take it down, we look unstable. If you don't take it down, I said, I will, and I won't do it nicely. I am hanging up, he said. You need to calm down and stop acting like a lawyer. Be a daughter for once. The line went dead. I sat there, holding the receiver, listening to the dial tone. Be a daughter for once. In his mind, being a daughter meant being an accomplice. My cell phone buzzed again. It was Blair. Stop calling Dad. You are giving him high blood pressure. You don't understand. Carrie, we need this. Rick's dealership is under audit. We need to show income. We need to show flow. If we don't land these 2 investors by the end of the month, we lose the house. We lose everything. I read the text. It was a confession. They weren't starting a consulting firm because they had a passion for finance. They were starting it to launder money, or at least, to create the illusion of solvency to hold off creditors. They were using my clean reputation to cover their dirty tracks. I didn't reply to Blair. I forwarded the text to my personal email. Evidence, item number 402 in the file project family. I went home early. I couldn't focus on corporate risk when my own life was a crime scene. When I walked into the apartment, Nicholas was already there. He was sitting at the dining table, his laptop open, surrounded by papers. He looked up, his face grim. I found something else, he said. I put my bag down. What Nicholas turned the laptop around. It was a scanned document from a public records database. It was an application for a small business grant from the state of Georgia. It was dated 2 weeks ago. The applicant was CH Consulting. The registered agent was Blair Whitman. But the business address listed, it was an address in Seattle, not our current apartment. It was the address of the first apartment I rented when I moved here 10 years ago. And at the bottom of the page was a signature, Caroline Howard. It wasn't my signature. The loop on the C was too wide. The slant was wrong. It looked like someone had practiced my signature from a birthday card and tried to replicate it. Nicholas pointed to the address. They used your old address so the mail wouldn't come to us. He said, but they used your name so the background check would clear. This is forgery. Caroline, federal forgery. I looked at the signature. A stranger forging my name would be a crime. My sister forging my name felt like a violation of my soul. It was a theft of my identity. Yes, but it was also a theft of my autonomy. She had decided that her need for a lifestyle she couldn't afford outweighed my right to exist as a separate person. I sat down. I opened my laptop. I am not calling them again. I said, I pulled up the contact information for our family attorney, a man I had hired to set up our wills, who had no connection to my parents. What are you going to do? Nicholas asked. I am doing what I do at work. I said, I am initiating a takedown. For the next 3 hours, I worked with the efficiency of a machine. Step 1, I contacted the domain registrar for the website. I submitted a DMCA takedown notice and a formal complaint for impersonation, attaching a copy of my driver's license and a sworn affidavit that I was not associated with the site. Step 2. I drafted a cease and desist letter. I didn't send it myself. I had my lawyer send it via certified mail and email to my father. Blair and the web developer, the language was not familial. It was brutal. Unauthorized use of name and likeness, fraudulent misrepresentation, immediate demand for retraction. Step 3. I contacted the Georgia Secretary of State's office. I filed a report regarding the fraudulent grant application, flagging the signature as a forgery. I was burning the bridge. I was pouring gasoline on it and lighting the match. But the final blow, the one that proved this was no longer a family dispute but a war, came the next morning. I was at my desk, sipping black coffee, feeling the hollow exhaustion of a sleepless night. My office phone rang. The caller ID said, "Internal compliance." My heart hammered. Compliance never called unless there was a breach. "Caroline Howard." I answered. "Caroline, this is Sarah Jenkins in HR," the voice said. "And I have Robert Vance, the Chief Risk Officer, on the line." Robert Vance was my boss's boss. He was a man who didn't make phone calls. He made decisions. "Caroline," Robert said. His voice was cold. "We received a disturbing communication this morning." "What kind of communication?" I asked, gripping the edge of my desk. "We received a whistleblower complaint via our ethics hotline." Robert said. The caller identified himself as a concerned investor. "He claims that you are operating a private consulting firm, CH Consulting, that is soliciting clients using Ravenport's proprietary data and conflict of interest information. He claims you are funneling business away from the firm to your personal entity." The room spun. They hadn't just stolen my name, they had attacked my shield. They knew that if I cut them off, I would have resources. So they tried to cut off my resources. They tried to get me fired. Did the caller give a name? I asked, forcing my voice to remain steady. He declined to give a name. Robert said, but the call originated from a 912 area code. Savannah. I closed my eyes. It was likely my father, or maybe Rick, Blair's husband. They thought that if they threatened my job, I would panic. I would call them begging. I would sign whatever they wanted just to make the complaint go away. They didn't understand. They were playing checkers. I was playing 4D chess. "Robert," I said, opening my eyes, "I am going to send you a file right now. It contains a cease and desist order. I had my lawyer serve yesterday against the operators of that website. It contains a police report I filed this morning regarding identity theft. And it contains a timeline of ongoing harassment from estranged family members who are attempting to extort me." There was a silence on the line. "You filed a police report?" Robert asked. "Yes," I said, "against my father and sister. This is not a conflict of interest. Robert, this is a criminal attack on my identity. I am the victim here, not the perpetrator." I hit send on the email I had prepared the night before, anticipating exactly this move. I heard the ping as Robert opened the file. I heard him clicking through the documents. "Okay," he said after a long minute. "This looks extensive." "It is," I said. "I am handling it, but I need you to know that CH Consulting is a fraud. I have zero involvement. We will review the documentation," Robert said, his tone softening slightly. "But Caroline, this is messy. We don't like messy." "I know." I said, "It will be clean by the end of the week." I hung up the phone. I sat there for a moment, listening to the hum of the server room down the hall. They had tried to kill me. Not my body, but my life. They had tried to destroy the career that was the only thing standing between me and their control. I picked up my cell phone. I had one more call to make. I dialed the number for the fraud division of the Savannah Police Department. "Officer," I said when the dispatcher connected me, "my name is Caroline Howard. I would like to speak to a detective regarding an active case of wire fraud and identity theft involving a sum over $50,000. I gave them the names, Henry Howard, Blair Whitman. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel sad. I realized then that the family I was mourning had died a long time ago. Maybe they never existed. What existed now was a group of people who would cannibalize their own kin to keep up appearances, and I was done being the meal. Revenge is not a crime of passion. Passion is messy. Passion leaves fingerprints. True revenge, the kind that dismantles a life without leaving a bruise, is an engineering project. It requires blueprints, permits, and a cold, structural understanding of your opponent's load-bearing walls for the next 10 days. Nicholas and I turned our dining room table into a command center. We did not yell. We did not throw wine glasses against the wall. We hired a forensic accountant and a private investigator based in Atlanta, a man named Sterling who charged $300 an hour and spoke in short, declarative sentences. We needed to know the scope of the infection. We knew about the website. We knew about the credit inquiry, but rats rarely chew through just one wire. Sterling's report arrived on a Tuesday. It was a PDF file, 40 pages long, and reading it felt like watching a slow-motion car crash involving my own biography. They were not just fishing for loans. They were hunting for clients. My father and Blair had been attending local Chamber of Commerce mixers, handing out business cards for CH Consulting. They were pitching themselves as a boutique firm backed by Seattle tech money and Silicon Valley risk algorithms, but the victims were not faceless corporations. They were targeting the locals, Mrs. Gable, who owned the chain of 3 bakeries downtown, Mr. Henderson, who ran the dry cleaning empire, people who had known me since I was a girl with braces, people who trusted the Howard name because they remembered my grandfather. The pitch was simple and devastatingly effective. Caroline manages the portfolio from the West Coast. They said, "We handle the client relations here. You get her institutional access with our personal touch." They had taken deposits, $5,000 here, $10,000 there. They called them retainers for an investment fund that did not exist. I looked at the list of names. These were people who could not afford to lose $10,000. This wasn't just fraud. It was predation. "We have enough to go to the police right now," Nicholas said, tapping the screen. "We can have them arrested tomorrow." I shook my head. "No, if I go to the police now, it becomes a messy private dispute. My father will say it was a misunderstanding. He will say I verbally agreed to it and then changed my mind. He will charm the local judge. He will paint me as the ungrateful daughter trying to ruin the family business over a technicality. I need them to confess." I said, "I need them to say it on the record, in front of witnesses, or in writing. I need the kind of evidence that leaves no room for charm. I need them to feel safe." So I built a Trojan horse. I opened my laptop and composed an email to my mother. I drafted it carefully. I removed all the sharp edges. I removed the legal threats. I wrote it in the voice of the daughter they remembered, the one who was desperate to please, the one who would apologize for being punched. "Mom," I wrote, "I have been doing a lot of thinking. The last few weeks have been so hard on everyone. I hate this distance between us. Maybe I overreacted about the website. I know you were just trying to help. Nicholas and I are flying into Savannah for the Civic League fundraiser this weekend. I want to come. I want to talk. Maybe we can figure out a way to make this work." I brought the checkbook. I hit send. The response time was 3 minutes. "Oh, Caroline." Thank God my mother's reply was frantic with relief. "We knew you would come around. We are so relieved. The fundraiser is the perfect place. Everyone will be there. We can announce the partnership properly." They took the bait. They swallowed it whole. They were so blinded by their own need for money that they didn't pause to ask why the daughter who had just filed a police report was suddenly offering to write checks. They thought they had won. They thought I had broken. But Blair, true to her nature, could not resist one final twist of the knife. She needed to ensure that when I came back alone. She needed to sever my support system. That evening, Nicholas's phone buzzed. He looked at it, and a dark, humorless smile crossed his face. "You need to see this," he said. He handed me his phone. It was a text from Blair. "Hey, Nick, I shouldn't be telling you this, but I feel like I owe it to you. Since you guys are coming down, you should know. The reason Caroline has been so weird about money lately, I heard from a friend in Seattle that she is seeing someone, a consultant at her firm. I think she is funneling cash to him. Just be careful. I don't want you to get hurt. She is just like her father." I stared at the screen. The audacity was breathtaking. She was accusing me of the exact crime she was committing, funneling money while simultaneously trying to destroy my marriage. She wanted Nicholas to distrust me. She wanted me isolated, so that when I arrived in Georgia, I would have no one to turn to but them. I handed the phone back to Nicholas. Screenshot it. I said, print it. Add it to the dossier. We spent the next day assembling the physical evidence. I did not want digital files that could be corrupted or deleted. I wanted paper. We printed the fake contracts my father had issued to Mrs. Gable. We printed the screenshots of the website. We printed the text messages where they asked for tuition, for renovations, for loans. We printed the timeline of the identity theft. We printed the affidavit from the Secretary of State confirming the forged signature. I bought a binder, a black, leather-bound binder. I organized the documents with tabs. Tab, unauthorized use of likeness. Tab B, wire fraud. Tab C, forgery. Tab D, extortion. It was a heavy book. It weighed 3 pounds. 3 pounds of truth. We flew to Georgia on Friday morning. We did not tell them our flight number. We rented a car and checked into a hotel downtown, avoiding the family house. 2 hours before the event, my phone rang. It was my father. I put it on speaker. I pulled a digital recorder out of my bag and set it on the hotel desk. Georgia is a one-party consent state for recording conversations. I was the one party. Hi, Dad, I said. Caroline. He boomed. He sounded jovial. He sounded like a man who had just won the lottery. We are so excited. I just wanted to go over the talking points for tonight. Talking points, I asked. Yes. When we introduce you, I was thinking we pitch you as the Chief Strategy Officer. It sounds commanding, and we can tell the investors that you are putting up, let's say, 20% of the initial capital, just to show skin in the game. I watched the red light on the recorder blink. 20%. I repeated. And in exchange, I get shares, obviously. He said, we will work out the paperwork later, but tonight is about the handshake. It is about the image. I have Mrs. Gable coming. She is ready to sign over her retirement fund management to us. $50,000. I told her you personally reviewed her portfolio. Did you? I asked. Did you tell her I reviewed a portfolio I have never seen? He laughed. A dismissive, hearty chuckle. It is just a figure of speech. Honey, you will review it. Eventually. We just need to close the deal tonight. Fake it till you make it. Right. That is how the big boys do it. So you admit you haven't invested the money yet? I asked. You are taking the deposits based on my name. Of course, he said. That is the leverage. That is the business model. Look, don't get bogged down in the details. Just smile, shake hands, and agree with me. We are going to make a killing. I let the silence hang for a second. Okay, Dad, I said. I will see you there. I hung up. I stopped the recording. I looked at Nicholas. He was buttoning his shirt. He looked at the recorder, then at me. That is the nail, he said. That is the coffin, I corrected. I dressed in white. It was a deliberate choice. Usually, I wore black to blend in, or navy to look professional. Tonight, I wore a stark, architectural white jumpsuit. I wanted to be visible. I wanted to catch the light. I wanted there to be absolutely no mistake about who was in the room. The Civic League fundraiser was held in the ballroom of the DeSoto Hotel. It was the same crowd as the River Club, just with better lighting and higher ticket prices. The room was filled with the low hum of Savannah gossip and the clinking of crystal. We walked in. I saw them immediately. They were near the front, standing under a chandelier. My mother was wearing sequins. Blair was wearing a dress that looked suspiciously like one I had seen in a magazine editorial a month ago. My father was holding court, gesturing with a Scotch glass. They saw me. The relief on their faces was instantaneous. It was gross. It was the look of a parasite seeing a fresh vein. Caroline, my mother cried out, waving her napkin. They started to move toward me. They opened the circle to let me in. They were ready to perform the happy family reunion. They were ready to drape their arms around me and absorb my shine. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I walked toward them. Nicholas a step behind me carrying the black binder. My father reached out a hand. Caroline, sweetheart, You look $1,000,000. Come here. I want you to meet Mrs. Gable. Mrs. Gable was standing next to him, a sweet-faced woman in her 60s holding a clutch purse. She looked at me with awe. "Oh, Caroline," she said, "your father speaks so highly of you. I am so relieved you are handling my nest egg. I was so nervous about the market. I stopped 3 feet away from them. I didn't take my father's hand. I looked at Mrs. Gable. Mrs. Gable," I said. My voice was clear. It carried over the nearby conversations. "I need you to know something." My father's smile faltered. "Caroline, not now. Let's get a drink first. I have never seen your portfolio." "Mrs. Gable," I continued, locking eyes with her, "I do not work for CH Consulting. I am not a partner in this firm, and I strongly advise you not to write that check." The air in the immediate radius vanished. The chatter stopped. My father dropped his hand. His face went from flush to pale in a heartbeat. "Caroline, what are you doing?" "I'm clearing the record." I said. I turned to my mother. I turned to Blair. Blair's eyes were darting around the room, checking to see who was watching. Everyone was watching. "You sent me an email," I said to my mother, keeping my voice steady but loud enough for the circle to hear. "You said you wanted to reconcile. You said you wanted to be a family." "I am trying," my mother hissed. "Stop this, no," I said. "You wanted me to come here so I could validate a fraud." Nicholas stepped forward. He handed me the black binder. I held it up. It looked like a hymnal in a church of judgment. "This binder contains the cease and desist orders I filed against you yesterday," I said. "It contains the police report for identity theft. It contains the affidavit regarding the forged signature on the grant application Blair submitted using my name." Blair gasped. A literal, strangled sound. "You called the police. I told you I was done." "Blair," I said, "I told you I wasn't paying anymore. But you didn't listen. You stole my identity because you thought I was too weak to protect it." I turned back to Mrs. Gable, who looked like she was about to faint. "Mrs. Gable," I said gently, "do not give them any money. This company is a shell. It has no assets. It has no license. It is a scam designed to pay off my brother-in-law's car dealership debts." Liar Blair screamed. It was the wrong move. The scream shattered the veneer of the polite society gala. Heads turned from every corner of the room. The music seemed to stop. Blair lunged at me. She actually lunged. Her face twisted into a mask of pure, entitlement-fueled rage. Nicholas stepped in front of me. He didn't touch her. He just stood there, a wall of calm engineering. Blair bounced off his presence and stumbled back. My father grabbed her arm. "Shut up, Blair." He looked at me. His eyes were pleading. He looked at the binder. He realized, in that second, that I wasn't just making a scene. I was holding a nuclear football. "Caroline," he whispered, "please, we can fix this. We can go outside. Don't do this here. Not here." I looked around the room. I saw the faces of the people who had ignored me for 20 years. I saw the people who had treated me like background noise. Now, they were listening. "I am not doing anything. Dad," I said, "I am just providing the data." I placed the black binder on the cocktail table next to Mrs. Gable. "Everything is in there," I said to the room at large. "The fake contracts, the text messages, the recordings. If anyone has given Henry Howard money for CH Consulting, I suggest you read tab B." I looked at my mother. She was weeping now. Her mascara running, ruining the facade she had spent 40 years maintaining. Why, she sobbed. "Why would you do this to us? We are family." I looked at her, and I felt absolutely nothing. No guilt, no anger, just the cool detachment of a risk analyst closing a file. "No," I said, "you are a liability, and I'm closing the account." I turned around. I took Nicholas's arm. We walked out. We didn't run. We walked. We walked past the frozen waiters. We walked past the stunned socialites. We walked past the security guards who were rushing in to handle the screaming woman in the sequins. As we pushed through the heavy double doors into the humid Savannah night, I took a deep breath. The air tasted of jasmine and exhaust fumes. It was over. I hadn't just left the table. I had flipped it over. And for the first time in my life, I didn't care who had to clean up the mess. We had not made it to the double doors yet. The confrontation with Mrs. Gable had drawn blood, but my family was like a hydra. You cut off one head, and another screams for attention. They knew that if I walked out that door, the rumors would start spreading like wildfire, and their credibility would turn to ash. They needed a grand gesture. They needed to control the narrative before the whispers turned into shouts. Before Nicholas and I could cross the threshold of the ballroom, the sound system shrieked with feedback. A spotlight swung wildly across the room, cutting through the dim ambiance until it landed on the small stage at the front of the hall. And there was Blair. She had run to the microphone. She was breathless, her cheeks flushed, her eyes manic. She looked like a beauty queen who had just been told the crown was made of tin. But she was going to wear it anyway. "Ladies and gentlemen," she shouted, her voice cracking slightly before she smoothed it over with a practiced laugh. "If I could have your attention for just one tiny moment, we have a special surprise tonight." The room went quiet. People love a spectacle, especially when they sense a disaster underneath it. Nicholas tightened his grip on my arm. "Keep walking," he murmured. I stopped. "No," I said. "If I leave now, they will tell a story about why I left. They will say I was sick. They will say I was jealous. I need to hear the lie so I can kill it." Blair waved her hand toward us, beckoning me with a frantic, theatrical enthusiasm. "My sister, Caroline Howard, is here tonight," she cried out. "The genius behind our new venture. C.H. Consulting Caroline. Come up here. Don't be shy." "We want to tell everyone the story of how this family dream started." The spotlight swung toward me. I was blinded for a second. The applause was polite, confused, scattered. My father stepped up to the microphone next to Blair. He adjusted his tie. He looked confident, but I could see the sweat glistening on his forehead from 50 feet away. "Caroline is a little stage shy," he boomed, his voice oozing charm, "but she is the backbone of this operation. We are so proud to announce that with her backing and her personal guarantee, we are opening our dedicated fund to local investors starting tonight." He paused for applause. He looked directly at me, his eyes hard. He was daring me. He was betting that my desire to avoid a public scene was stronger than my desire for the truth. He was betting that I would smile, wave, and play along to save the family name. It was a bad bet. I didn't walk to the stage. I turned to the man standing quietly in the shadows near the exit. It was Mr. Abernathy, the president of the Civic League and the organizer of the event. Beside him stood 2 uniformed officers who had been hired for event security. I walked over to Mr. Abernathy. I didn't whisper. I handed him the black binder that Nicholas had been carrying. "Mr. Abernathy," I said, my voice carrying in the sudden silence of the room, "I believe you need to see tab C regarding the unauthorized use of this venue for fraudulent solicitation." Mr. Abernathy looked at the binder. He looked at the stage. My father was still talking. "We are targeting a 20% return in the first quarter." "Stop the mic," Mr. Abernathy said to the sound technician. The sound cut out. My father tapped the microphone. He looked confused. "Excuse me," he said, his voice tinny and unamplified. Mr. Abernathy walked onto the floor. He raised a hand. "Mr. Howard, Miss Whitman," he said, "could you please step down? We need to have a conversation in the green room, immediately." The humiliation was absolute. It wasn't a scream. It was a hush. The entire room watched as my father and sister were escorted off the stage. Not as guests of honor, but as liabilities. I followed them. Nicholas walked beside me. The green room was a small, cramped space behind the stage, filled with half-empty water bottles and the smell of old coffee, the moment the door closed, blocking out the crowd. The explosion happened. "What the hell did you do?" Blair screamed. She spun around, her face twisted. "You just humiliated us in front of the entire town, in front of the investors. I didn't do anything." "Blair," I said calmly, "I just handed over the paperwork." My father was pacing the small room, his hands shaking. "You ungrateful, spiteful little, do you know what you have done? You have ruined me. I will sue you. I will sue you for defamation. You can't sue for defamation when the statements are true. Dad, I said, and then the door opened again. My mother, Darlene, rushed in. She had been in the audience, and she looked terrified. Hank Blair. What is happening? Why did they cut the mic? She looked at me. Caroline, fix this. Tell them it is a misunderstanding. Tell them you are the partner. I looked at my mother. For years, I had viewed her as the passive victim of my father's ambition and Blair's greed. I thought she was just the enabler, the woman who nodded and smiled to keep the peace. But as I looked at her clutching her purse, a large, heavy designer bag, I remembered something. I remembered the kitchen. I remembered how fast she had moved to hide the folder. Mom, I said, give me the bag. What? She clutched it tighter. Don't be ridiculous. Give me the bag. Darlene, I said. My voice was low and dangerous. She took a step back. No. Mr. Abernathy looked at her. Mrs. Howard, if you are concealing evidence of a crime, that makes you an accessory. My mother's hands trembled. She looked at my father for help, but he was too busy trying to call his lawyer on a phone with no signal. She opened the bag. She pulled out a thick manila envelope. I took it. I opened it. It wasn't just the loan application. It was everything. It was the original trust documents for my grandmother's estate, which they had tried to alter. It was a stack of credit card applications in my name, dating back 3 years, all denied, all filed from her IP address. It was a notebook, a handwritten ledger detailing exactly how much money they had extracted from me over the last decade, and exactly where it had gone. October 2000 for Caroline, paid for Blair's cruise. December 5,000 for Caroline, paid for Hank's club dues. She hadn't just watched. She had kept the books. She was the archivist of my exploitation. I looked at her. The grief hit me then, sharp and blinding. It wasn't the grief of losing a mother. It was the grief of realizing I never had one. I had a bookkeeper. You knew. I whispered. You knew everything. You tracked it. My mother didn't cry. She straightened her spine, and for the first time, I saw the steel under the sequins. Somebody had to manage it, she said coldly. Your father has big ideas but no follow-through. Blair spends faster than she thinks. Somebody had to keep the lights on, and you had so much. Caroline, you have so much. Why did it matter if we took a little off the top? You never even missed it. I stared at her. You never even missed it. The mask was gone. There was no family left in the room, just 4 people standing in the wreckage of a transaction that had gone bad. Blair had stopped screaming. She was sitting on a folding chair, weeping. But even now, her tears were manipulative. I just wanted a nice life. She sobbed. Is that a crime? I just wanted what you have. It is not fair. It is a crime when you steal it. Blair, I said. My father stopped pacing. He turned to me. He drew himself up to his full height, trying to intimidate me one last time. Listen to me, he growled. You are going to walk out there. Pick up that mic and tell them this is a misunderstanding. Or so help me God. Caroline, you are dead to this family. We will cut you out. You will be an orphan. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had terrified me for 30 years, and I realized he was just a small man in a rented tuxedo. Nicholas stepped forward. He moved into my father's space. Nicholas is not a violent man, but in that moment, he looked like a natural force. You are confused. Hank, Nicholas said. His voice was quiet, but it seemed to drop the temperature in the room by 10 degrees. You think you are threatening her with a punishment. Nicholas continued, but you are offering her a release. You don't get to disown her. She has already fired you. He looked at all of them. You didn't lose Caroline today, Nicholas said. You lost her the day you decided she was useful instead of human. You lost her when you confused a daughter with a diversified asset class. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the sound of a bridge collapsing into the sea. Then, the door opened one last time. It was not security, it was Maris Doyle, my grandmother. She was leaning on her cane, dressed in a simple gray suit. She looked frail. but her eyes were burning with a clarity that shamed everyone else in the room. She walked past my father. She walked past my mother. She stopped in front of me. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was folded in thirds. "I changed my will this morning." "Caroline," she said. Her voice was rasping but steady. My mother gasped. "Mother, don't you dare quiet." "Darlene," Maris snapped. She didn't even look at her daughter. She handed the paper to me. "Everything I have," Maris said. "The cottage, the land, the remaining bonds. It is all going into a trust, a real trust, and you are the sole trustee." She turned to my father. "And I have already given a statement to the police regarding the coercion you used to try and get me to sign over the deed last year. It is on record." My father went pale. "That was a misunderstanding." "Maris, it was elder abuse." "Hank," she said. She looked back at me. She placed a hand on my cheek. Her skin was like paper, dry and cool. "Go home." "Caroline," she said. "Go back to your rainy city. You have nothing left to pay here. The bill is settled." I covered her hand with mine. "Come with us." "Grandma." She shook her head. "No, my life is here, but I am not their victim anymore. I am the witness, and I will make sure the truth stands." I looked at her, and I knew she would be okay. She was the only one of them who had ever really seen me. And now, she was free too. I turned to Nicholas. "Let's go." We walked out of the green room. We walked through the side exit, bypassing the ballroom entirely. I didn't need to see the crowd again. I didn't care what they thought. The court of public opinion didn't matter anymore. I had my own verdict. We got into the rental car. The night was quiet. As we drove toward the airport, leaving the lights of Savannah behind us in the rearview mirror, I expected to feel empty. I expected to feel the void where my family used to be. But there was no void. There was just space. Clean, open space. We flew back to Seattle the next morning. The fallout was swift. The police investigation is ongoing. The website, CH Consulting, was taken down 48 hours later. My father is facing charges for wire fraud. Blair is facing charges for forgery. My mother is currently living with a cousin in Alabama because the bank foreclosed on the house. I didn't intervene. I didn't send money for lawyers. I didn't send money for bail. I let gravity take its course. 6 months have passed since that night. I still work at Ravenport Risk Dynamics, but I have started a new project on the side. It is a mentorship program for young women in the risk management and finance sector. It is small. It is private. I teach them how to read a balance sheet, yes, but I also teach them how to spot the red flags in their own lives. I teach them that their value is not an extraction resource for others. I call the program The Signal, because that is what we are. We are not background noise. We are the signal. Last night, it rained in Seattle, a hard, driving rain that lashed against the windows of our penthouse. I lay in bed next to Nicholas. I listened to his steady breathing. My phone was on the nightstand. It was turned on. The volume was up, but for the first time in 38 years, I wasn't waiting for it to ring. I wasn't waiting for the crisis. I wasn't waiting for the request. I closed my eyes, and I slept. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It was a long journey from the background to the spotlight, and I'm glad you walked it with me. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from a rainy city like Seattle, or somewhere sunny? Please leave a comment below to share your thoughts. And if you enjoyed Caroline's victory, please subscribe to the Juliet Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button so we can help more people find their voice and stop being the background noise in their own lives.